All right, day 2 of the 5MX Sales Summit. Thank you for all the speakers coming aboard today. We've got some great speakers today. We've got Bradley from Risk Methods, Cameron from ZoomInfo, Michelle from Steelcase, and Jonathan previously from Paycor, now with Doma. Before we kind of get moving, I'm going to have each and every one of the speakers give a quick introduction about who they are, what they do, and a little fun fact about themselves. And I'll let's see, Bradley, how do you want to go first?
Sure, nothing like the pressure of being first out of the gate. Thanks, Andrew.
You can handle it.
Thank you. I know, absolutely. And thanks for everyone else for participating and for the people who were in and viewing this. And it's really a pleasure to be part of this crowd and our conversation for today. So I'm Bradley Pastor. I'm responsible for sales for North America for Risk Methods. That includes our customer success, our onboarding, pre-sales, SDRs, basically everything go-to-market for us. And we focus on the risk part of supply chains. We do supply chain risk management. Little fun fact about me, live a little bit south of Boston in one of the suburbs here, and been enjoying the pandemic with 2 dogs, two cats and a dog, and 3 kids running around the house. So it's been a busy time of the year, but we've been making it through and looking forward to hopefully the other side here.
Awesome.
So thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Jonathan. John.
Yeah, John Siders, AVP of Doma. It's a new title and escrow company revolutionizing the industry where the traditional sales approach has always been door-to-door type sales. I'm in Southern California. I've been with the company for 2 days, but I've been in sales management for 5-6 years now. My current role is to grow out an entire new sales division for the nation for Doma. Fun fact about me, I have 2 kids. I just noticed they're in the background, and a wife. And used to live up in the Bay Area, moved down here about 13 years ago, and excited to be part of this. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you. Cam, come forward.
All right. Cam Johnson, I head up sales team across our commercial and corporate divisions at ZoomInfo, so companies less than 250 employees on average. And John at Doma is heading up a business and building out that they went door-to-door sales. So I figured I'd use that as the interesting fact that I sold. My first job post-college was selling Cutco knives and vacuums door-to-door. And how I got into the software world was I actually sold who ended up being my director of business development at Zerto. I sold his uncle, and he brokered an intro and said, "Man, that presentation was awesome. I think you shouldn't be selling knives and vacuums, but actually get into some sales that can make you some real money." So that's how I got in the software world, and that was about 9 years ago now.
That's awesome. Nice little story. Michelle.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Thank you for inviting us. Thank you for the audience that decided to join. So my name is Michelle Nwafo. I'm currently with Steelcase. I'm the Steelcase Health Sales Director for the East region in the US. But prior to that, I worked 8.5 years with Vitamix. I was responsible for growing our sales internationally. And then before that, I spent 20 years with Libby Glass in a very similar role where I helped the company have more of a global footprint. Fun fact about myself, it's funny, we all decided to use the same fun fact. I was born in Cameroon. I grew up speaking French. Then I studied in France. And then my first real job while I was in France was to sell paintings door to door, which was in southern France. It was quite an experience. I never realized at the time that it would really help me tremendously later on in my career. So thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So the topic for today is customer engagement and outreach, a very broad topic. And I do that purposely so we can kind of have a broad conversation, and we'll get into the details a little bit later. But as everyone knows, and everyone that's listening today, selling has changed forever. And I think the pandemic is not necessarily the reason. I think traditional selling in and of itself has been declining steadily for some time now. That being said, I think The first question, an obvious question I'd like to ask each and every one of you is how your own customers have been impacted and what has been the biggest shift that you've had to make since the pandemic. And I'm not going to call on anybody, so anybody wants to.
Yeah, I'll start that off. I think the biggest shift, and I think what companies are struggling with, or maybe just finding flaws in their process, is ramping up reps. So my team, historically, I'm promoting BDRs into AEs, or AEs with maybe a year or two of selling experience. And for a company that was historically always in the office, building through camaraderie, sitting next to the top rep and learning, building out an enablement program on the fly as we move from home and trying to make sure that we have all those resources, I would say, is something that we're keeping an eye on. And how do we get people to ramp faster? That's probably the biggest challenge that I've seen across ZoomInfo. And I mean, we're talking a company of 2,200 employees, so it's not that we don't have the resources as we have a great enablement team. It's just, how do you capture that camaraderie via Slack, via meetings, and still get those people that normally would be able to sit next to someone and hear something or get coached on the fly to use technologies like Chorus, which, obviously we just acquired, but to still be able to do that kind of in real time as possible, and not in, a weekly one-on-one or a weekly forecasting review.
So Cam, just to follow up on that, and obviously that's a big challenge for you guys. So how are you adapting in this new environment? You've obviously got a problem now. You've got this whole remote management and learning situation going on. How are you guys adapting and being successful regardless of what is going on in the macro world right now?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we did was invest in our enablement team. Pre-pandemic, we had maybe 2 or 3 folks, and now that team is right around 15 and growing. And secondly, it's holding office hours outside of just every new rep's first 2 weeks of drinking water from a fire hose and then go hit the phones. And so things like, office hours, daily check-ins, where it's almost like we're taking everything that happened throughout the day and then we're bringing that group together and kind of breaking those things down. What did you hear? What was your best call today? What was a challenge you had today? And kind of being able to build that out almost in real time, not as we're on the floor, but on a daily basis, right? So every rep is going to hear something different or have a different challenge for the day. What you notice after the first month outside of those first 2 weeks is a lot of the things start to overlap. And then you start to be able to coach people with one person, something that they ran with that we've covered. Now another person's like, oh, we went over that XYZ. And so it starts to be able to build that foundation of not being in the office, but almost having that daily in real time camaraderie and coaching.
That's awesome.
Yeah. What I can maybe add to build on top of what Com said. I can see companies struggling with the decision-making process of deciding how many people are going to remain remote and how many should be brought back to the office, or having a hybrid solution where you would allow both options. And that process, I think, is pushing companies to think differently. It's clearly a need that's going to exist. People have realized that through this pandemic situation, what we were considering as a possible remote option of allowing people to work away from a physical office has to, in many cases, almost become a standard. And when we look at it closely, what we're finding out is that you have to offer primarily 2 things. You have to offer choice, so you have to allow the employees to be able to decide whether they want to be in remote locations or they want to work physically in the same location. But you also have to allow control for the employees to decide which one works best for them. And it's that balance between choice and control given to the employees that is at times a little challenging for companies to find.
Wow. So letting the employee decide to a certain degree what is going to work best. That's not typically what we hear out there, right? Companies are telling employees how things are going to go. That's really, really interesting. Who else wants to add something to the conversation?
Yeah, I'll add. One thing that's really been helpful too is the instant feedback, similar to what Cam was saying. The ability to be on a call with anybody anywhere in the country. You're on a Zoom presentation with somebody else, and your sales rep is doing this presentation, and you're on there with them. The second that meeting's over, you call them up and say, hey, let's talk about what worked and what didn't work. That constant feedback is extremely helpful. Another thing I found that's very helpful within the confines of working remotely is also pairing people up with their strengths and weaknesses as well. So very quickly having mentors is very impactful. At my last job, I was able to match each one of the new hires with a mentor right off the bat, even though they'd never mentored before. Even unofficially, I had them as a mentor. And those people ramped so much faster than the typical just go through sales training and sales enablement and get some feedback from leadership, because it allows you as a leader to kind of expand your influence and help people all improve. Last thing I'll state is sharing best practices is incredibly helpful. So I've definitely seen that's helped, like Cam said, kind of build faster. Is everybody on a regular basis shares on like a Slack or a Zoom or something where like, hey, here's a presentation that worked. Here's a talk track that worked. This is a success. This is a failure. And I'll also elicit those responses on group calls. I'm like, I want to know what worked and what didn't. So that real-time feedback has really helped, especially in the remote environment.
Yeah, I think don't be stingy with what works as a team, right? Share it with your team, and everyone's going to be successful, which is awesome.
Sure. So to build on John and Cam and Michael, and I agree with everything they've outlined, specific to customer engagement, some of the challenges have occurred where it was easier to engage with customers because the customers were in their offices. And now the customers are some in the office, some are not. Some are not even at their homes, right? They've gone away to a vacation home, or I spoke with someone who had gone to a vacation property. You just don't know where they're going to be. So specific customer engagement has become really challenging. And one of the ways, we don't have any secret sauce in terms of how to engage with them other than being open and honest about that, recognizing that people are home, recognizing that their situations are in flux, recognizing that their audio, internet, connections, cats, dogs, the UPS person showing up, kids, it's going to be challenging. And I think that those challenges are going to continue to stay. So, well, at the end of the day, I have a responsibility to my team, company, investors to help drive revenue growth here. It's really hard to do if you engage with your customers and your prospects in a way that you used to, meaning I showed up, it's noon, where are you, right?
Yeah.
What you have to realize is that there could be a lot of different factors coming in play for them. What's interesting is I found that same consideration, if you demonstrate that, you're getting it back. Where I think when it was the older days, which was only a year and a half or so ago, if you showed up late to a meeting in an office, they'd say, well, hey, I know we had booked for an hour, but you're 5 minutes late because there was traffic. I'm sorry, I don't have time. We're now online. I do find that once we get our prospects on the phone and our customers, there is that level of consideration. The flip side, I think having difficult conversations is now harder. And what I mean by difficult conversations, if you're trying to work a deal through and there's some legal terms or there's issues, or you sort of need to have that conversation with your champion when you're selling, saying, all right, how do we navigate this? Help me understand. Absolutely, that was easier when you were walking down a hallway or you're having lunch with them or something like that. It's hard to get that ad hoc level of engagement with the people that remote. Ultimately, I think it's going to be something that we're going to have to continue to work and deal with. And what I'd say is different now than what it was when I used to coach teams that were remote, which was primarily my work experience has been working and running remote teams, is that now everyone's remote. So the people who are going back to the office, they're the anomaly. Or if they're going back 2 days a week, they're an anomaly. Or maybe Cam can give us a better sense on how we can find people's cell phones, because calling the office is just not an effective way of engaging with people anymore. So we see that as well.
Yeah, it almost seems a lot more difficult even to reach people, right? Because if they are at their homes, that personal professional line is so blurred, right? They may be dealing with the kids, helping them with homework, taking the dog out, So, it's not, reaching people is difficult, but you mentioned also, Bradley, is having those difficult conversations is difficult remotely. And I think we're still figuring that out, right? It doesn't sound like we have all the answers yet as this, continues to unfold.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. So, tell me what strategies are really working right now in your organizations to reach people, to connect with them. And, when the pandemic hit, some organizations clearly were not prepared, right? A lot of what they were doing was not digital, right? Digital selling or remote selling. They relied a lot on face-to-face, interaction. So, those companies certainly struggled, and some didn't make it for sure. But I wonder, what actually is working, and we talked about the shifts, but get more specific on what actually is working and that really help drive sales on a consistent basis.
So I'll jump in here. So what's been helpful is, back again, so I keep dating myself here, and I'm dating myself here on a 14, 18-month period of time, was a successful rep could be successful focusing on one channel of selling, whether it's call, whether it's email, LinkedIn. And the successful reps on my team are the ones that really are embracing having an omni or multi-channel approach to doing it. And that includes, some of it is consistent stuff. I'm going to download the annual report. I'm going to get access to that. What I would call nuts and bolts selling. Know your customer, know your prospect, understand it. However, if we take the example I mentioned earlier about using the phone's going to call the office. So you could look, there's a difference, and there's always been a distinction in my mind between being busy and being productive. So dials a day does not translate into activity. And certainly now, dials a day, if you're calling a desk where no one sits, is not yielding anything. But you could stand back and say to your SDR manager, wow, look, Bobby's really productive. Well, but Bobby's not getting any engagement. So the transition from having very a loud sales floor to maybe a quiet sales floor, where people are actually they're looking at LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. Again, Andy, you mentioned the blur between personal and professional, which we're running into now. So having multiple ways to engage and leveraging technologies, not to give Cam a selling point here, but technologies like ZoomInfo, to be able to go and look at all facets of the customer and the prospect, and to be broader about who you're going to engage inside the organization. So it's what we found is getting back to really that fundamental basic of who you're engaging with, where you've engaged. When we do deal coaching, to look at, all right, what are all the other areas that you could be going on? And I find for some reps that are really reluctant to do that next level engagement, they feel that's blurring the line. A great example, and there's some debates on LinkedIn you see about this, is it okay to call someone's cell phone? I think if your cell phone is in your email signature on your business card, it's game on, right? Now, if they say, please stop calling, then you have to respect that. But if people proffer that information up, absolutely. You should engage it and you should use it. And even asking, what is the best way to engage? Should I text you? Should I email you? What's the best way of doing it? And then I don't think our CRM systems, not necessarily ours, but just in general, are set up to view and handle that multi-approach, right? I don't see Twitter handle in there, for example. Maybe that's the way to get engaged with people, right?
So I would say, Brad, I absolutely agree with what you said. Highly personalized outreach has been a key to success. To gather as much data as possible about the person you're reaching out to, and having a specific reach out for that person and why that you would reach out to them. So the amount of data you can find, ZoomInfo being one of them, and plus there's a ton of data depending on which industry you're going after about companies like never before. And also there's a ton of information about what companies are using competitors to yours as well. So when you do outreach to them, knowing about their business, how long they've been there, what maybe they posted recently, and then engaging with them in a specific way that not only talks about their business outcomes that you could potentially support, but also competitive differentiators, and focusing on that. Because just like selling to companies are able to research your product and every other product out there incredibly fast as well. So you've got to create value. You cannot have a generic approach. That's been key to success. The other thing that's been very important is to have a very methodical sales process for a remote sale, or a hybrid approach, as Michelle said as well. There can be a hybrid sales approach, but being very methodical. This is our first meeting. The next one is a discovery. Then we do a demo. Then this. Let's plot this out, and being very specific about what the next steps are. Getting the the prospect to buy off on that process, and so that you're very engaged and understand the steps all the way through that. The outreach absolutely needs to be omni-channel, but once you get them in, to be very methodical in terms of your process, and then gauge obviously the level of communication that they're comfortable with. Hey, can I come in person for a demo? Can I do this part of the process in person, or should we do it this way? It's been very effective.
How much of your sales organizations are utilizing things like LinkedIn or even texting, right? You've got their mobile number. Maybe calling is not the right approach, but maybe texting and asking for permission to chat. What are some of the other omni-channel, things that you're using that are seeing some success in your organization?
Everything.
Yeah.
I think Brad and John kind of touched on that, but it's like any way you can get information on these people and use it to your advantage to create that personal outreach could be your benefit. I can tell you a success story where we had one of our deals that was stuck in flux for probably 6 months. And in one of the calls, one of my reps, and this was all his idea, picked up on that this guy was in Napa Valley and really loved this wine that he was talking about. Right now, you're only going to be able to call someone so many times. You can email them so many times, right? You can check in with legal and procurement. And what he did was he sent a bottle of wine to the office that said, hey, just remembered you really liked this on the call, or just remember this was your favorite wine that I was listening back to the call to see where we missed the mark, and signed the info. The guy, when he got it, when we got the delivered, called him in within an hour and was like, hey, I didn't forget about you, right? And we got the deal. But it's like, how can you separate yourself from the rest of the competition in this work from home environment? And you need data to do that, because if we didn't have Chorus, right, we wouldn't be able to go back and listen to the call and pick up on that if he didn't write it. You need the address of the company, right? We had the guy's mobile number. We were texting him. We were using multiple channels. But I think any way that you can use data to your advantage is fair game that is available until someone said, hey, please don't text my cell phone. Or, hey, we're already, we're in an email thread. I don't need you to send me a LinkedIn. Or, hey, you're on my Twitter now, right? But I mean, you're going to use all those channels, and the way that you can get creative and differentiate yourself, it's all fair game.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for that. And I'm wondering, just kind of a follow-up to that, as we talk about really providing value at every turn, personalization, all that makes sense. But were there particular set of skills and habits that your team did not have when the pandemic hit that needed to be adjusted? And how did you, really help your team along to really, kind of push for some of those key critical areas of skills and habits that are required for this modern selling environment that we're in?
I would add that we did a little bit of the opposite, which was the tendency. So we had a great office culture. We would do activities during the course of the day, and it'd be quite often where I think around 4 o'clock every day we would play Jeopardy on Alexa, and just had a really excellent balance between personal engagement, professional engagement in the office. And when the pandemic hit, I think there was a natural tendency to try to recreate that remote. And we've done that to some extent. The other tendency was, let's just replace everything with meetings. So then your day becomes back-to-back meetings. And I was getting constant feedback from the team, which was, oh, it's great. I've been in meetings all day. Now at the end of the day, I have time to do my work. And that started to become a problem because you're getting caught in back-to-back meetings where you felt, John, you were indicating in terms of coaching, and Cam, you're talking about lining people up, and Michael, you mentioned some of that as well. So then it's like, well, since I can't talk to someone by the coffee machine, let's just fill up the day with stuff. And people are getting a lot of just sick of Zoom and sick of being on video. And not that we didn't like seeing everyone, but there is a certain level of exhaustiveness, I find personally, being on Zoom all day. And what we really started to do, at least for the North American team, was, please, let's just stop having meetings, right? Like if it can be addressed in an email, let's just address it in an email. And if you're going to have a meeting, make it clear in terms of why we're doing it, why we're coming to be there, what's the expectation, and push out the prep content beforehand. I can't say we do this all the time, and I can't say that I do it all the time. The tendency is we should do this more often than not. So if something can be resolved in email, let's resolve it in email and have a level of, and this goes for brand new employees. We just hired someone, we extended an offer last week. We'll have someone onboarding in 2 weeks, right? So it's trying to hire people with that high level of trust and core competence and trust people initially out of the gate rather than like, oh, you have to define and build your trust because everyone is remote and you can't just beat people to death over, let's be on Zoom all day. So it's funny because we pulled back on a lot of that, and the feedback I've gotten, and we do internal employee NPS scores, is actually pretty positive. And there's a lot of times on Fridays when we do one-on-ones where I say, listen, can we just not turn on video, right? And you hear the person be like, oh, thanks, right? And I'll do calls where I'm taking the dog for a walk and just getting out. And it sounds really weird to say it out loud, but there are many times we're in the office, I'd say to someone, hey, Michelle, let's go grab a cup of coffee and we'll go for a walk and we'll do that. And that seemed very normal, but somehow when you're at home, it's like, oh my God, I need to be sitting here on my laptop and I can't leave because someone's going to realize I have a life, right? So it's been the inverse of that, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing that I maybe add to everything that has been said, and probably comes closer to a B2C situation where you're marketing and promoting and selling to consumers, but it could have some applications also for B2B. I think that because we don't have the ability to meet people face to face, it's almost a return to the basics where there's a heightened awareness of what the needs of your customers are, and make sure that you know that journey, you understand the different steps, and then you can find solutions that really are going to be appealing at every step. And again, it's not something, I cannot say that customer journey is a novel approach or concept, but it's just that you have to be even more aware of what is it that will help you make a difference. I was reading an article from Harvard Business Review, and they were talking about how when people moved away from their usual urban locations because they could work remotely and got into more suburban locations, they suddenly were not just behaving differently when it came to time, but also where they have new needs. You may have a need for building a tree house. And that's really related to the fact that you are now in a separate location, but you did not necessarily anticipate that need when you were deciding to work from that location. So that's one example. But so the point was just, again, being very aware and cognizant of the fact that you have to understand where your customer is and anticipate what the outcomes are going to be to differentiate yourself. So those are some of the skills and maybe challenges that we did not have to the same level of extent before the pandemic.
I wanted to talk to Brad a little bit about a point that he made, like Zoom fatigue in meetings. I think that's something that like we all have gone through. And in the beginning, it was kind of like almost how do we make sure that everyone is getting what the information they need, but also doing the work and like these daily check-ins. And like, Brad, I want to like understand a little bit about how your team went from so many meetings to less meetings, and if you've seen any correlation with like the success of your team and being more productive.
So a great specific example is I'm a big proponent on doing forecast calls one-on-one, right? So if the 5 of us on our sales team here, each of us will do a call. I really like that. It's something that I liked, and a lot of sales leaders, you go with the playbook, I would do the calls and really everyone was getting nothing out of it. And I asked the first time, is everyone getting out of it? And I think people were being kind of polite and like, I'm the boss, and be like, yeah, sure, it's great, right? But it was half-hearted. It's like eating a lukewarm meal. Yeah, it's fine. So it went like once or twice, and I started asking a lot of people, and I was like, this is BS. Like, you're really just not being honest with me. And so I came forth and I said, I think they're really bad. We're not getting the information we need. The forecast predictability is not there. I'm going to go and we're going to do a group forecast call, which I actually don't like. I have a very visceral negative reaction to group forecast calls. But I was like, this is better for the team. And so we took an entire day of forecast calls, shrunk it down to 2 hours. Everyone's on it. We try to run it pretty tightly scripted, make it much more interactive. And that was the connectedness that people were missing. So it solved a couple of things, right? It reduced Zoom fatigue because everyone's now on one, and all the other people on the forecast call that help support it, right? So my bosses, people in pre-sales, customer success were on these multiple calls as well. Now get greater value. You've freed up data points during the course of the day, to do other things. And I was getting better predictability and forecasting at it because people were more engaged during the calls. And I think for me as a leader, for all of us, there's a tendency to double down on what worked. But I think we just need to be more open and responsive and engaged. And it comes down to asking that question and giving your team the space to say what isn't working. So if I just took the first time when I asked and said, hey, does it work? And everyone's like, yeah, like it just didn't feel right. And I had to ask multiple times to get to that point. And even now I say, hey, does the forecast call work? And some people are like, it's better. It's not perfect, but it's better. And I'm like, all right, I'll take better. And we'll keep iterating through that process. So it's everything is constantly changing. And here outside Boston, we were thinking about doing a team get together in September, fly people in, have everyone. And when we're doing an internal conversation about it, people are like, with Delta, I'm just not comfortable doing it. If we do something outside, yes, but if we're all going to get together, we're all going to wear masks, and we're all going to be in some dark basement of a bar, I don't think it's worth it, right? And I think it took a lot of strength for the people to stand up and say that and be like, hey, I'm not interested in doing it. So what we had set and what we had planned a month ago, it's constantly changing. And that, I think, is a pace. At the end of the day, we're working with people who come with all the same fears, securities, hopes, insecurities that we all have. And it would behoove all of us when we're engaging to really recognize and understand that. And I think as leaders, it's our responsibility to lead empathetically that way. And if you do that, like I said, with the forecast call, it might not be the first time, might not be the second time. Hopefully by the third or fourth time, they'll engage with us and they'll share. And so Cam, specifically your point, that's where I think the magic happens, where you get people who become more engaged, who felt disengaged, where you get better productivity out of it, where they realize that they can engage better with their customers and to say, hey, we did a demo a while back and I said, I'm home alone, my dog's running around, I'm expecting a delivery and he's going to lose it when the call comes. So I apologize. No one said anything, but I just went. And of course, like clockwork, as soon as I hit the meaty part of the demo, ding dong, UPS is there, my dog loses it. And everyone starts laughing on the call because their dogs could hear my dog barking and everyone starts laughing. It's like, you just got to go with it, right? And that's going to keep continuing.
Yeah.
Who knows when? Hopefully not forever, right? Like I hope at some point I get back in the office and move me, but that's where we're going to get productivity. If people can take a breath and people can be like, that's where my sales teams and your sales teams and our customers are going to be more effective because they're not stressed about those other stressors.
Right.
Hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, I had one addition I wanted to say too, and it's one of the struggles with working remotely is many of the salespeople I've worked with have been outside salespeople, and I'm not too generalization, but really enjoy people. Maybe type A personalities, like just go getter, like to meet people. You tell them you're going to stay at home for the next year and a half, and each time you delay going back to the office, it's very overwhelming and stressful. So one of the things, like Brad said, is to ask them, how are you doing? What's going on? How's life? Tell me about what's going on. And tell me the negatives. Like I want to hear positive and negative. Sometimes just sharing what sucks gets people to feel like, all right, I've got it off my plate. I at least have said it. I accept that this change is what it is. But if I have no opportunity to say it, I feel like it's not respected. And another thing is it's good to do it in a group setting too, so that when one person complains, as long as it's not a negative session, it gives the other people a chance to say, well, that's me too. And it's funny when you have a group setting, sometimes somebody else will say, I think of it this way. And it's almost as though the whole group was like, man, we're all in this together. And that's how I can cope with it, because you gave me a different perspective. It actually really helped, kind of like group therapy. It's almost a funny way to say it, but it actually helped because the group would come up with ideas together on how to manage through it. One of the biggest challenges I've found too, though, is it's easy to get lost in sales processes and not prospect and organize your day. As a sales leader, it's very, very challenging to continue people's focus on, hey, you know what, you should be spending whatever your metrics are in your industry, 40 to 60% on prospecting, and the other 40 to 60% on working with deals that are in the process. You can't miss that opportunity. I remember 15 years ago when I first worked from home, my whole family thought it was a joke. They're like, you can't do anything. You're going to be doing laundry all day. I love to remind them, I'm like, and look at the way we are right now and how we've all worked it. So you do have to be very organized. Some people just cannot organize their day. So your day, your week, your forecasting, your planning is incredibly impactful. And unfortunately, some people have really not been able to manage it. They just cannot separate business with personal, or they cannot organize. They're just not, it's not in their DNA. And it's very difficult sometimes to say, hey, I hate to do this, but we've got to block out your day and you've got to respect your prospecting time. That's something that's really challenging because you're not in their house. But sometimes people will not do it if somebody's not holding them accountable.
Yeah, I think just to follow up on that, Jonathan, obviously not everybody wants to work from home. They do better in an office, right? I mean, natural extroverts tend to want to be around people constantly and get that stimuli. I have a question from an audience member, and I'll read this verbatim. I find that teams that work remotely, although have a great option in terms of work freedom, they struggle essentially with consistent motivation that the office space has. How could that be improved? If anyone wants to take that, and we can go from there.
Yeah, maybe I can share with you some of the research and the findings that we have around that topic. You should realize that, as you said a minute ago, Andy, not everybody is going to be as productive when you are in a remote location. And we find out that a lot of the younger generation, very often they moved into a space that is not well designed for remote work. They have limited amount of space. They don't have the privacy that you would need to have. They have very often younger children around the house. So you have to be mindful of the fact that not everybody is going to be well suited to be able to be effective remotely. Mm-hmm. You also have to think about the roles. If they're in sales, some of the work can be done remotely, but at some point, very often, A-type people and the selling personality requires face-to-face interaction, so it wears on people to be unable to do that. So depending on the role that they have, and in this case, sales-related roles, they could be struggling after a while. And then finally, what I'll add, because I went through it myself personally, when you onboard new recruits, just remember that having structured onboarding is even more important. The more you can give them very clear outline of what to expect, what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, have them organize themselves. That is very useful. And second, help them also make connections that they would normally have made if they were in the office. Help them reach out to others. Create a list of individuals that you want them to meet with virtually, and even go as far as setting up those meetings for them. They may not do it, which is going to impact your ability to communicate the culture and so on and so forth. So that's the advice that I would bring.
Yeah, although I think motivation is an empty fuel, not long-term sustainable. I wonder what else we can do if we have a situation where one of our team members is struggling. How do you coach to that? How would you approach that person and have a conversation with them?
I actually wanted to go just a quick second before and just state that motivating people in a group setting can be challenging and also has to be genuine. So anytime you can have other team members say what their success is, as opposed to just being the leader and said, hey, I saw that, Jim did this yesterday. Great job. Ask the team, hey, what worked yesterday? What are some successes? And have them share it. It can help motivate others because they see naturally they're sharing those positives, and it feels like it bubbles up from the team as opposed to it's a leadership thing, where I'm just picking out a couple of people and highlighting them. Another thing too that's incredibly important is that onboarding and even in recruiting is to understand what motivates you. I actually interviewed a brand new person yesterday who will be starting here in the next week. And I said, what motivates you? And he's like, for me, it's recognition. A lot of the younger generation, it's recognition for a job well done. And then it's money. So it's funny that, sales leadership always think, oh, it's going to be money, money, money. And some people it's career development. Some people it's time with their family. Other people, he said flexibility too. He likes to surf, to snowboard. And I'm like, yeah, as long as you're doing your job, absolutely, you can have some of that flexibility. So it's important to know what each person's motivation is and what their goal is too. Find out what their 6 month, 1 year, 5 year goal is. Some people don't have those things. And so you can help them develop it together. And then you're a partner to them. You're not just talking to them like, hey, this is what's important to me. I need you to hit the sales number. It's, hey, Andy, you told me that your goal is to move up to leadership. It will take a couple of years of overachieving. You'll need to mentor others. You'll need to do this, this, and this. You start doing those things and having a clear path together, and it creates a sense of loyalty, and people will push themselves harder than ever before.
So not just working on the professional development side, but personal development, right? It's not just about work all day long. It's how that, what else do they value in their lives? So
yeah, I think John talked about a really good point, right? It's like goals. I know like one thing that has helped me get to where I'm at in my career is a constant reminder of my goals. And I worked with a great sales leader that helped me like really understand like how to coach to your team's goals that lead to their motivators. So, one exercise that we run on my team at the beginning of every year is I want to know your personal goals. I want to know your financial goals, and building a plan with your team and members to get them there. Right. And it's not just, I want to close 1 million in ACV this year. It's, well, okay, why? Right. What is 1 million in ACV going to lead you to? And then when you understand what that is, and I'll use one of the reps on my team who's proposing to his girlfriend next month, it was to be able to have the extra cash where he still wasn't necessarily breaking his bank. It was extra cash to save for the ring while he still was investing and paying for his car and his apartment. And from there, we had to break down a monthly plan on what ACV he needed to get there. And then from there, it doesn't stop there though, right? Now it goes to, okay, managing to those KPIs, right? So if you're getting 30 demos a month, what's your close ratio need to be? What's your average sales price need to be? How many dials do you need to get there, right? And so when you frame it that way, it's not just chasing a number. You're now coaching to the KPIs and the metrics that you built with that person. And if they're not there, now and then as a leader, it's our job to figure out, well, why aren't they there? If they're doing all of these things, then where in the sales process are they missing the mark? And that's where you're using other technologies to go and coach to that and get them there. And that's a reminder of the way that I used to motivate teams, even working from home, outside of giving someone a day off, right? Or saying, hey, take the afternoon off. And just being a human and trusting them, right? If your team trusts you as a leader, they're going to respect you more. And when you have that two-way street where it's not you're just drilling them all the time, they're going to come to you and say, hey, John, hey, Brad, hey, Michelle, I'm burnt out today. And that's happened, right? And it's cool. Let's talk about it. What's going on, right? And oftentimes they're going to open up to you. And then it's, are you going to make that decision to continue to drill them? Or are you going to say, you know what, John, why don't you take the afternoon off? Or if you want, maybe take off next Friday and do something with your family. I can't tell you how effective that has been for someone who maybe is not even at their number, right? Or they're still chasing, or they are just truly burnt out. To hear someone say, go take a day and spend it with your family and don't log on your computer. I'll handle any meetings you have. Like, that person is now going to have your back because you just did a solid for them.
That's awesome. That's a great perspective on motivation. Appreciate that, Cam. Now, if anyone else wants to chime in before we continue on to the next subject. Just to follow up on kind of outreach and personalization, we have another question that really asks, what's the best method to craft the right message? Where does the data come from? Because data is not enough, right? We need insights. We need to provide value. So where does that come from, and how do we actually use it in a practical way to really, effectively engage our target audiences?
Well, I can start the response and let the others add to it. I'm a very, as you know, I'm a very high proponent of customer journey. I mentioned that earlier. So with Business Insight, what you need to do is understand as much as possible what are the needs that you are trying to provide a solution or an answer for. And it's a little bit of a mindset shift. You want to shift away from trying to necessarily sell a product or service, which is really tied to a company outcome. What you want to do is look more at what the customer needs. So the customer journey, for me, allows the mind to be focused on the customer first versus what are the company outcomes that are trying to achieve. A sales target for this month based on the KPI you set for the person. It's very much company focused. The beauty of always going back to the customer journey is to say, let's think first about what they need. And then from there, it'll automatically, if you can satisfy that, it will drive to company outcomes, such as sales target and so on. So Business Insight is clearly, to me, is a very important part of that. And the ability to be able to drill into right targeting of your audiences, right targeting of your markets, and then understanding what is it that they need.
So really being customer focused and not product or solution focused is kind of what I'm hearing. If anyone wants to share kind of how that practically works in their own organizations, of how they get basically data and get it to a message that people are going to resonate with.
It's not easy, right? I mean, I think if we all knew the secret sauce answer to that, it'd be a different
I'm taking notes, believe me. Yes.
Yeah. So one of the things that we looked at, and some of us on our own team have done, is we did DISC personality profiles. So if you're familiar with understanding what the DISC profile is and understanding sort of getting an assessment around your own self-behavior. And there's a plugin from a company called Crystal Knows. So if you're doing prospecting on LinkedIn, you can look at someone and it'll give you a sense of what their just profile is. And we have some guidance around how to craft messages for them. It's like better than not, but it's still not 100% perfect. There's a lot of people on LinkedIn that have recommendations around how you should do outreach, and I can almost see verbatim when someone posts on a Monday of here's the way you should do outreach. Invariably, the end of the week or the beginning of next week, I'll get an email that will be the same exact way. And there's themes that people send out where it was, has a bear got you? I haven't heard from you. All that's cute. It really doesn't move the conversation forward. I might respond back and be like, hey, great, you follow John Burroughs, fantastic, good for you, right? What still ultimately matters is Cam's laughing because he knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's having clarity around why are you emailing, right? So, Bradley, I listened to you at the 5X Sales Summit, really liked what you had to say about selling empathetically. I'm with Crystal Knows. It gives you a way that you can look at someone's LinkedIn profile and understand more about their just profile so you can gauge an empathetic level. Is this a challenge your team's having? Like, I'll respond to that. I don't need tips and tricks and all this other stuff in it, right? And what I think about our leads, and I say this to the team all the time, someone was a lead for us because they want a car. We need to understand, are we the right car for them? And when you break things down into that simple thing, it becomes much easier to understand because, all right, if you're a single person, you might not want a minivan. The flip side is if you're a single person who mountain bikes every weekend and camps, you may want a minivan because you also live in the city and you don't want to pick up because you don't want your bike sitting in the back of the trunk. So you can't make assumptions about engagement. And that's really where understanding clearly what's your value prop, understanding the engagement of the person you're going after, and really delivering value. And getting that at the top is what's critical. All the rest of the stuff, well, yeah, it's cute. Bradley responded back, haha, yeah, thank you for attending it. That's not going to close the deal for you, right?
Right.
And I think that's what missed. Everyone's looking for like the secret thing, and they ignore the secret thing is delivering value.
Yeah. I think another thing too, Brad, to not only a targeted approach to what does it mean for them and how does it improve them, but also I'm noticing the more value you can create with the client, even outside of your own product, is helpful too. So if you're looking for, maybe you have a channel like a broker channel or something like that, where you can get business, or an indirect channel, is not only, hey, why should you be sending business to my company, but how do I provide value to you outside of what products I have? I can put you in touch with this, and this person, or I can give you this insight. I can give you some insight into, ZoomInfo intent on companies looking for your product. You're welcome, Cam. No, I'm just kidding. But there's lots of things you can provide for value to customers or partners outside of just, hey, I sell this one product. I sell title and escrow insurance. It's a set product. However, I'm selling to mortgage lenders. Can I provide them with lists of potential companies that they can go after, partners that they should work with, top realtors in the area, technologies that I'm seeing other lenders use to help them be successful? If I'm giving them that value, it's not just I'm going to call up John only when I have this specific need, because that's all he talks to me about. It's, he holistically can give me access to other people, give me insight, provide some type of product, service, support, connection. It's a deeper level of partnership or support as opposed to just one thing that I have to sell.
Yeah, it's such a great point. I mean, I think, positioning yourself as someone who can solve other issues that your products and services don't, builds trust, right? Relationship, which is so valuable today. So great point. Anybody else want to chime in on that? Okay, so let's move on. I know we got a few minutes left here. You guys have been great. Again, if anybody wants to post a question from the YouTube stream, go ahead and do so. You do have to be logged in. Let me just kind of ask a couple big questions. I think, and one is, I think, is an interesting question. What's the biggest thing that surprised you since the pandemic first occurred until now? I mean, what is that one thing that you just weren't expecting And if anyone wants to share, that would be great.
I'll jump on this one. So I was with a company called TriNet for 6.5 years. They sell a very complicated product. It's called a Professional Employer Organization, or PEO. What it is the employees come under a different federal ID number, and that kind of shared arrangement or shared administrative employer arrangement allows smaller companies to operate in terms of payroll, HR, and benefits like a big company. It's hard to explain that to a business owner or a CFO, like, hey, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my employees? So that sale was a lot of hand-holding, talking, building trust. It was amazing to see that we were able to pivot, and I had my best year ever this last year in this remote environment. If you would have said at the beginning when I started in the PEO industry for ADP like 15 years ago that you could potentially sell this over the phone and by computer, I would have said there's no way in hell. Like, it's too complex. There's too much trust that needs to be built. There's too many sales process pieces that you just can't do over the phone. You absolutely can with screen sharing, video demos, sandboxes, proposals, interactive return on investment software that you're working with together with screen shares. Like, you can do some cool stuff online you can never do before, and that can allow you to sell even complex products anywhere in the country remotely. It's pretty wild. That shocked the hell out of me. I really thought that this was going to be a struggle that we would just suffer immediately. I think everybody just assumed that, sales are going to drop to 20% of pre-pandemic numbers, and that was not the case. It definitely took time. It did go like this, but I really thought that would be a permanent challenge to the sale.
It's clear, and I think the data supports this, that customers are open and willing to purchase things digitally now, remotely. And that's been bared out for sure in your story. So thanks for sharing that. Anyone else want to chime in on that question?
Yeah, I'm going to add, and I apologize in advance, Andy. I have an emergency that may require my attention. So
no worries. We got 3 minutes, so we're near the end anyway. Thanks.
All right. But what I want to add is that I probably will say I was not expecting this pandemic crisis to impact company cultures as it has been. I'm seeing a lot of situations without getting specifics, but I'm getting involved in situations where people have such extreme positions that it is unfortunately driving differences and creating tension, friction within organizations like I never expected, which is unfortunate, which is something that we'll obviously have to deal with. But to me, that is probably one of the biggest surprises of what this pandemic crisis is forcing us to face, which we haven't had to the same level of extent in the past.
Interesting. Anyone else want to chime in on that? Because I got one more question. So here it is, guys. What small or big changes do you see coming down the pike that you feel is going to impact sales once again, or transform sales, the way we do business? What are those things that you see kind of looking ahead or around the corner that we don't know about right now? Tell us something we don't know.
I have a feeling that there will be more and more upstart new companies that will be able to challenge the bigger companies like never before. That's what I see as the biggest change, is the ability to compete and leverage technology with bigger companies. I think that's really going to be interesting. So often we look at the big monster companies in the industry, but there are so many ways to piece this thing together sometimes in a competitive environment that you better be continually evolving or you will get eaten up by competitors. So I think that's something that will be absolutely, I see happening even more over time.
That's great.
Yeah, and maybe to reinforce what John just said, I was going to say that in my opinion, agility is going to be critical for companies, because I don't know that we should ever expect things to remain the same for an extended amount of time. And for that reason, because larger companies very often have more difficulty, have a challenge in being agile, I believe that the new starts, the smaller companies are going to have the ability to do it better, and with that, carve out new markets for themselves.
Awesome, thank you. Well, we've reached that 1 o'clock hour, and I just want to say thank you to all the speakers today. Bradley, Jonathan, Cam, Michelle, thank you once again. I hope you're able to participate down the road in some more sales summits. And I know what you said today is highly valued among our audience. And again, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.